Hello everyone, and welcome to the Hidden Secrets. Tonight, we're going deep into a world that exists all around us, but one we rarely notice. Imagine standing inside an ancient forest. There are hundreds of trees around you. They don't have mouths. They don't have ears. They don't walk toward each other. And yet, scientists have discovered something fascinating. Trees can detect chemical signals from other plants, respond to attacks, and interact through complex underground relationships with fungi. So, do trees actually communicate? Or are we simply giving human meaning to a process created by chemistry and evolution? Tonight, we're going to separate the fascinating science from the myths and uncover what researchers really know about the hidden conversations of forests. The forest that looks silent. When we enter a forest, our attention naturally goes upward. We see enormous trunks, branches moving in the wind, leaves catching sunlight. But beneath our feet is another world, a microscopic world filled with roots, bacteria, fungi, water, minerals, and countless chemical interactions. And one of the most important players in this hidden ecosystem is a group of fungi known as mycorrhizae. These fungi form partnerships with plant roots. The relationship can be mutually beneficial. The plant supplies the fungus with carbon compounds produced through photosynthesis, while the fungus can help the plant obtain nutrients and water from the soil. In some forests, fungal filaments can connect with the roots of multiple plants. These connections are called mycorrhizal networks. And this is where the story becomes much more interesting. Researchers have found evidence that these networks can be involved in the movement of resources and chemical signals between plants. Some scientists have even described them as a kind of underground communication pathway. But there is an important distinction. This doesn't mean trees are having conversations like humans. There is no evidence that a tree is consciously thinking, "My neighbor is in trouble, so I should send it a message." Instead, plants respond to chemical and environmental signals through biological mechanisms that evolved over millions of years. And that difference matters. When a tree is attacked, now imagine a tree being attacked by insects. The damage doesn't simply remain at the damaged leaves. The plant can detect the attack and activate its defense systems. One fascinating part of this response involves volatile organic compounds, often called VOCs. These are chemicals that plants can release into the air. Some of these compounds can change when a plant is damaged or exposed to herbivores. And nearby plants may detect those airborne chemicals. Researchers have found that exposure to such signals can influence defensive responses in neighboring plants. In other words, one damaged plant can potentially change the chemical environment around it, and another plant can respond. That's remarkably close to what we might casually call a warning system, but scientifically, it's better to describe it as plant signaling and information transfer rather than human-like communication. The plants aren't speaking. They're releasing chemicals. Other plants detect those chemicals, and their physiology can change. The underground network. But the forest doesn't communicate only through the air. Underneath the soil, mycorrhizal fungi create extensive networks of microscopic threads. These threads are called hyphae. They can extend through the soil far beyond the immediate surface of a tree's roots. When fungi associate with multiple plants, they can form what researchers call common mycorrhizal networks. Scientists have investigated whether these networks can facilitate the movement of nutrients, carbon compounds, and defense-related signals between connected plants. Some experiments have produced evidence that stress-related information can move through these systems and influence neighboring plants. This is one reason the popular phrase "Wood Wide Web" became so famous. The comparison is memorable. Trees stand above the ground, like individual organisms, but below the surface, their roots and fungal partners can create a much more interconnected environment. Still, the metaphor can also be misleading. The forest is not literally an internet, and fungi are not simply cables carrying perfectly addressed messages from one tree to another. The real system is far more complicated. Can trees recognize their relatives? Here's where the story becomes even more controversial. Some research has explored whether plants can respond differently to relatives compared with unrelated plants. Scientists have investigated how trees and other plants interact with neighbors that share genetic relationships. There is evidence that plants can respond differently depending on their neighbors and environmental conditions. But popular explanations sometimes go much further. You may have heard stories about enormous old trees acting as mother trees, deliberately recognizing their offspring and sending them nutrients. It's a fascinating idea, but we have to be careful. The existence of fungal networks is well established. The movement of some resources through plant fungal systems has also been demonstrated under particular conditions. But the broader claim that forests routinely operate as cooperative families, with old trees consciously identifying their children and deliberately feeding them, is much more controversial. Scientists continue to debate how widespread, strong, and ecologically important these transfers actually are. This is an important lesson in science. A fascinating discovery can be real while the popular story built around it becomes exaggerated. Trees can also compete. And here's another part of the story that is often forgotten. Forests aren't simply peaceful communities where every tree helps every other tree. Trees compete. They compete for sunlight. They compete for water. They compete for minerals and physical space. Plants can also release chemicals into their surroundings that influence other organisms. This phenomenon is known as allelopathy in certain contexts. So the forest isn't a perfect society. It's a complex ecosystem containing cooperation, competition, parasitism, mutualism, and countless interactions happening simultaneously. That's actually more fascinating than the simple story of trees helping one another. So, do trees communicate? Now we can finally answer the question. Yes, but not in the human sense of the word. Trees can detect environmental information. They can release chemical compounds. Other plants can detect some of these compounds. Plants can alter their physiology in response, and mycorrhizal fungal associations can connect plants underground and may facilitate the movement of resources and signaling compounds under certain conditions. So when scientists talk about plant communication, they are describing biological systems through which information or signals can influence another organism. Not language, not conscious conversation, not secret words hidden inside the forest, but chemistry, biology, networks, and evolution. And perhaps that's even more remarkable, because trees don't need brains to respond to the world around them. Their bodies are constantly sensing changes in light, temperature, water availability, physical damage, chemicals, microbes, and neighboring organisms. Every leaf is interacting with its environment. Every root exists within a microscopic ecosystem, and beneath the forest floor, fungi are weaving through the soil in ways we are still learning to understand. The forest is more connected than it looks. The next time you walk through a forest, remember this: what looks like a collection of separate trees may actually be part of a much more complicated ecological system. The air carries chemical compounds. Roots interact with microorganisms. Fungi connect with plant roots. Plants compete and cooperate. And signals can influence biological responses. Scientists are still discovering exactly how important these interactions are in natural forests. Some claims are strongly supported. Others remain controversial. And that's what makes the subject so exciting. Because science doesn't become less fascinating when we admit what we don't know. It becomes more fascinating. The forest doesn't need a human voice to communicate. Its language is chemistry. Its network is biological. And its conversation has been unfolding for millions of years, long before humans ever learned how to listen. And perhaps the greatest hidden secret isn't that trees can talk. It's that a forest was never truly silent in the first place. This is the Hidden Secrets. Stay curious, keep questioning, and never stop looking beneath the surface. Until next time, thank you